Would Azula make a good Fire Lord? Hello, welcome to Symposium. This is probably the last video I'm going to make about a character from a kids show, but it's an interesting one and kind of finishes the arc of videos that I've done on her so far. Fire Lord Azula, she gets, or would be crowned at the end of the series of Avatar: The Last Airbender, which is interrupted as she fights Zuko and loses. The question is, would Azula have made a good Fire Lord? And the answer is probably not. If Machiavelli is anything to go by, and we would reference Machiavelli because she appears to rule in a particularly Machiavellian fashion. This is the description that's usually applied to her personality, although I don't think that she is quite as Machiavellian as she needs to be, at least textually. When the verb's use in modern English, obviously, aside, like Machiavelli probably wouldn't approve of a lot of the things that she does and the way that she conducts herself. Although, in many ways he would. So let's begin with, in The Prince, with Chapter 14, that which concerns a prince on the subject of the art of war, because Machiavelli thought that a prince ought to have no other aim or thought nor select anything else for his study than war and its rules and discipline, for this is the sole art that belongs to him who rules. Well, the question is, I suppose, in the world of Avatar, will there be further wars? If Ozai has conquered the entire Earth and subjugated or exterminated the rest of the people, I guess there'll be successor states and future wars that happen, future civil wars that happen. But on the subject of military force, I think Azula is probably going to do just fine. She seems to be a very competent general. She's very tactical, strategic. She's brave and indomitable, apparently. I think that she's a terrifying foe, to be honest, so she's unlikely to be conquered from outside forces. So that's not where Azula is going to fail. Azula's probably going to fail about the inside forces. And for this, we're going to move to Chapter 20. Are fortresses and other princely devices advantageous or hurtful? Because Azula's in a giant fortress, and, you know, whatever the Fire Nation capital's called. And so Machiavelli's opinion on fortresses is that they're as much a trap as they are a way of keeping yourself safe. It's better in his mind to be able to have free roam of the land than to be locked up in your own fortress. And this essentially allows you to keep the initiative on anything, not just war, on any subject. Staying locked up in your fortress means that everyone else has the initiative and you don't. And in his view, it didn't save anyone. Having a fortress doesn't actually save you if you don't have a good base from which to draw. And the base that Machiavelli thinks you should draw on is not being hated by your people. And that's an interesting thing. You know, the best possible fortress for a prince is not being hated by his people. And we find the roots of Azula's weakness in this regard, the fortress of her people. Because if we go, we can go back to Chapter 17 in The Prince. And this is the famous question that everyone thinks of when they think of the prince, really. It is better to be feared than to be loved. And Machiavelli asked the question in the chapter. It's called Concerning Cruelty and Clemency and Whether it is better to be loved than feared. And Machiavelli comes to the conclusion that every prince ought to be desired to be considered clement and not cruel. It's probably not for Azula to be considered clement and not cruel. She's tyrannized her friends, May and Ty Lee. May expressly tells Azula that she miscalculated about how much she fears her. So there is definitely an aspect of control and fear in their relationship. And Azula's, I mean, we learn in the last few episodes that Azula has always controlled people through fear. This is how she maintains her relationships. She manipulates people, the example being Zuko as they're growing up, constant gaslighting of him and keeping him feeling inferior to her. And genuflecting to power, which is her father, Ozai. In fact, she seems to be obsessed with it. And so for Azula, the question, is it better to be loved or feared? Well, she only understands how to make people fear her. She doesn't understand how to make people love her. That's what you see in the beach episode, which is why that episode's so great, actually. It's such an amazing window into those characters. She obviously feels it is much safer to be feared than loved. And so Machiavelli agreed with her in this assessment, saying that men are fickle, cowardly, and glory-seeking. However, just because they can't be relied upon for their love doesn't mean that that's not also the best security a prince can ask for. However, as Azula probably isn't going to be able to absolutely rely on it, and because her personality is as it is, this is probably not what Azula's going to achieve, and I can't imagine that she'll be considered clement and not cruel. And so we get to chapter 19, which is called That One Should Avoid Being Despised and Hated. And it's starting to look bad for Azula at this point, in my opinion. Machiavelli says that you have to avoid that which makes a prince hated. Primarily, this is being rapacious to a man's property and his women. That is something that men really hate. But also cultivating vile interests and like vile tastes can also make a person, despised. Like if he likes children or something, people probably end up despising him. But most men won't attempt to overthrow their prince if their property and honour is untouched. Well, I find it difficult to believe that Azula is going to respect people's property or honour, to be honest. I imagine she's not going to rape many of their wives, but I can't imagine that she's going to treat their property and honour as if they are things that should be protected. Being well-liked is something that a prince, in Machiavelli's view, should be trying to attain. It's good for the prince, and it makes the prince's life immeasurably easier. It makes outsiders less likely to attack them because they'll understand they'll have the support of the people that they rule over. It also protects you from conspiracies. It makes it more likely that people won't try and conspire against you, A, because they won't be inclined to, and the ones that are inclined to will be nervous about trying to expand the conspiracy, because when they mention it to someone, if you're well liked, there's a good chance they're going to be talking to someone who is going to feel offended that they are actually asking you this. Like, I don't want to conspire against the prince. I like the prince. He's doing a good job. It's a way of insulating the prince, and I don't think Azula's going to be able to get that. The way that she acts with banishment seems to imply that I imagine that she would have been removed via a coup after a while, just because of the way she was treating the people around her. But Machiavelli says, it makes him contemptible to be considered fickle, frivolous, effeminate, mean-spirited, irresolute, from all which a prince should guard himself as a rock. I mean, there is a possibility that Azula could maintain some kind of propagandistic front to the public. There probably is the chance that she'll be able to make that impression, at least officially. But I think the people around her certainly aren't going to agree, and I don't agree that I think that this will. I mean, it might be, here's the official propaganda, but it's unlikely that she'll ever be well liked. She'll ever actually have people who are like Azula stans in the Fire Nation. I think there'd be a more of an apathy to the fact that she's in charge, and just hoping she doesn't do anything bad to people. The thing that guarantees that Azula is going to fall to a civil war because of her mismanagement is her treatment of what Machiavelli would call the nobles, which are the important people in the state who help the prince govern the state. You being the perspective of the prince. They help the prince govern the state. He says, well-ordered states and wise princes have taken every care not to drive the nobles to desperation, and to keep the people satisfied and contented, for this is one of the most important objects a prince can have. Is Azula likely to do this? Well, probably not. She's going to claim that she's got absolute power and can do what she wants. She banishes her friends, nobles, anyone else who she pleases, which surely drives them to desperation. And if they could return to their lives and overthrow Azula, well, I imagine that looks quite tempting. And if you're not well liked, which Azula isn't going to be well liked, they're probably not going to find any difficulty actually finding allies in the conspiracy to take her down. And I can't imagine for a second that Azula's going to keep people contented. Although maybe she'll throw bread and circuses at them because, I don't know, she's contemptuous and thinks, oh God, that's what you've got to do with the livestock or something. But no, all in all, I don't think Azula would make a very good Fire Lord, sorry. She's a Fire Princess. I don't think she'd make a very good Fire Lord. I think that she would be warlike. I think that she would be ignorant and absent. I don't think she's going to improve the lot of the peasantry over which she rules. And I think she'll drive her nobles to try and overthrow her all the time, probably, because she's very, very absolute with them and banishes them on a whim.